My people are dead.
My people!
Him right now! Right now! He's dangerous!
Founders Day is the newest horror slasher movie to hit theaters in January, and of course, whenever you say the words horror and January in the same sentence, you have to wonder if it's going to be any good, because notoriously, studios have dropped horror movies in January when they don't have much faith in them. They just want to release them quietly so that then they can get a streaming service deal, and then someone on TikTok can go, guys, I just saw the scariest movie that I've ever seen in my life, and you've got to check it out. It's on Netflix now, and it's really good. Now, here's what we're going to do. We're going to break it down. All right, I've gone too far with that, but you get the idea. The point is, most horror movies that drop in January are not very good, and this year has already shown us that with Night Swim. Night Swim is a movie that I already did a review for here on this channel, and while I didn't hate it, it definitely wasn't the best we've ever gotten out of Blumhouse or out of a January horror month. So I turned my attention to Founders Day. Founders Day is directed by Eric Blomquist. It stars Naomi Grace as Allison, and Allison is a girl living in a small town going through a very heated mayoral race. Now, you wonder, why is a mayoral race very heated? Well, as it turns out, actually, the mayor controls some things like, hey, I don't like what I'm paying for my trash bill, or I don't like what I'm paying for my water bill. So pretty much the things that a mayor can help endorse or change, and so people are very heated in this town. So while you already have tensions rising in this town going toward a mayor race, well, you also have a serial killer slasher going around killing people with a gavel. And I like that. To me, having it set in a small town reminded me of a little movie you might have heard of called Scream, and I've got Ghostface right back there because it did. It reminded me, you've got a small town, you've got teenagers involved, and then you've got a serial killer in a mask, and it sort of turns into a whodunit. Now, that's my best description for this movie. If that sounds like an interesting premise for you, you can go check it out in theaters. I don't recommend it. I'm throwing that out now. I'll let you know later why, but I don't recommend you go see this. But my point is, that is the setup for this movie, and if it interests you, it is still in theaters right now. Moving on to my positives and my negatives of this movie. My first positive, and my only positive, unfortunately, is the look of the serial killer in this movie. I absolutely loved the look. He's wearing a judge's cloak while he's wearing an old-timey mask with a wig, and then he's got a gavel. But not only does he bash people with the gavel, but the gavel has a knife that comes out of the bottom of it. It's really cool. It's a cool weapon. It's a cool look to him. And again, I like that whodunit aspect. Those things worked for me. However, that's where my positives end for this movie. We got to get into my negatives. My first negative for this movie is going to be a package of two things. It is the dialogue for the characters in this movie, or it's just the actors giving the dialogue in this movie. I'm not sure which one is worse, but both are very bad. I understand that with horror movies, especially low-budget horror movies, you're going to get a bunch of unknown faces, but you have movies where that shines, where that actually makes it better because you feel like you can relate to those people because they're not these big movie stars. You're like, yeah, I'm in a small town. I can relate to that person. And so when they get unknown actors, they can actually work for you in that regard, but the actors have to be able to act. And 90% of the people in this movie couldn't act. It was very telling, and it was very evident on the screen that these people weren't very good actors. So when you pair that with bad dialogue, them delivering those lines horribly to each other just didn't work for me. My next negative is going to come off as a bit of a spoiler, so I'll throw spoilers up there right now. But basically, my next negative would be that the killer reveal was awful, but it's that there were so many awful killer reveals. There turns out to be like 6 killers in this movie, maybe more, and each one of the reveals is just annoying. There's not one of them where I was like, oh my god, I can't believe that. In fact, once the first killer reveal happens, I was like, okay, well, I can pretty much pinpoint all of the other killers that are going to be in this movie, and I was right. So the killer reveals weren't very exciting, and when you have a whodunit thriller slasher horror movie, you need the whodunit portion of it to really stick the landing. You could even say, well, hey, it didn't have great dialogue, didn't have great acting, but man, that twist is incredible. Can't believe they were able to pull that off. But in this movie, I can't even say that for it because they couldn't even pull off the twist for who the killer was correctly. And finally, guys, my last negative of this movie is going to be how the plot is overly convoluted. You have so many storylines going on, and when they finally bring them all together toward the end of the movie, none of them seem to satisfy the viewer. What I mean by that is you have the mayoral candidates that I talked about earlier in this review. So you've got their storyline, then you've got the storyline of their family, and specifically the storyline of their daughters, and then you got the storyline of those daughters' friends at school, and then you got the storyline of the other friends at school, and then you've got teachers at school, and then you've got the police officers in the town having their own storyline. Oh, and don't forget there's the killer and the killer's motivations in this movie. So you have all of these different storylines. And even though it's not the longest horror movie I've ever seen, it felt like the longest horror movie I've ever watched in a theater. It took forever to get to the point, and when they finally did get to the point, again, it wasn't satisfying at all. So I walked out of the theater and I said, this is one of the worst movies I've ever seen. I should have said one of the worst horror movies I've ever seen, because I really do feel that. It is just overly convoluted. Nothing makes sense in the end. You walk away going, all right, well, January horror movie, you got me again. Overall, it's not shocking for you to hear me say that I don't recommend this movie to anyone. I don't recommend you spend your money on it in theaters, and I don't recommend that you waste your time on it in streaming. It's just not a good horror movie. There's a reason they dropped it in January, but those are just my opinions because that's my review for Founders Day. Guys, if you have had the unfortunate ability to see this movie and you've got thoughts and you've got comments, throw those in the comment section down below. Let me know if we agree or disagree, what you liked that I didn't like. It's just important to me that I hear your thoughts too, so I'd love to know in the comments section. And finally, guys, if you like this review, don't forget to hit the like button because it helps the video, it helps the channel, and it helps me right here. Thanks for watching. I'll see you next time. Alright guys, so they got me with another January horror movie. Founders Day was a dud, and I wish it was better than it was, but it just wasn't. There were some interesting concepts in there. Not a good movie. With that said though, guys, if you want to check out any of my other reviews, well, I've got all of my horror reviews right there, and I've got all of my 2024 reviews right there.